In this session, we're going to be thinking about constructing rows that have tonal implications. Now, you might be puzzled by that remark because surely if a row is going to use all 12 semitones of the scale, or all 12 half steps of the scale, well, how could it be tonal? Because we haven't got a tonic, and we've been talking about we've got one statement of each of these 12 different notes, and part of the design of that is to make sure we're not implying a tonic or a key at all. But of course, it's possible to organize notes next to each other that have a kind of implication, that outline a triad that might be major or minor. So even though you're using all 12 semitones or half steps of a scale, you might be building in some implication of a key or a chord along the way. Now, is this a bad thing? Not necessarily at all. It may be something actually that you do want to do. So you want to write in an atonal style, but it's still got some kind of chord references maybe that you can see as points of resolution within other points of the row that might be more clearly atonal. So I want to just think about that for a moment in this session. So we can have suggestions of key centers within the row, even though that suggestion kind of goes against the original thinking that here we are trying to liberate the world from tonality by having kind of equal rights, if you like, for each of the 12 semitones of the scale. And we'll look at examples of this that I've got on the screen shortly. Now, if you're going to have key centers, of course, one thing we need to be aware of is that those key centers are likely to shift within the row. You know, you can't write a row that's in the key of C major. You can imply C major, but then before you know it, you're going to have a triad possibly that belongs to a different key. So it's certainly not going to give us any stability in terms of key, but there might be momentary reference to a key center or to a particular chord, but it's quickly going to move on either to something that is completely atonal or that's immediately going to imply another key center. Now, Krennek, he's another serial composer and writer on serialism. He advises avoiding more than 2 key centers within the row. So in other words, you might have a triad that's outlining a particular chord, suggesting a particular key here. You might have another one later on in the row, but Krennek says it's better not to do that more than twice. Otherwise, you're going to have a sort of kind of triadic row that might have sort of maybe 3 different chords or 3 different keys being suggested. And he's saying that is likely to create difficulty for you as you go through the piece. And I agree with him. If you try to do that, then you could easily find yourself getting stuck all the time thinking, oh, I've got a major chord in this key here, I've got a minor chord in that key there, I've got a major chord in this key there again. And even when you've got it going in retrograde and inversion and retrograde inversion, you're going to have those same 3 chords coming up over and over again. And it's going to get you stuck as the composition unfolds. So you might be thinking, well, I'm interested in this kind of serial lark, but I don't really want to be an atonal composer. So can I do something that implies some tonality within the row? The answer is yes, you can. But the health warning is don't overdo that. Otherwise, it's going to box you in and you're going to keep coming back to triads from maybe 3 different keys, and it's going to be very difficult to get the piece to develop and unfold in a way that doesn't just keep coming back to 3 places. So that's why I think Krennek is saying try not to have more than an implication of 2 key centers within the row. It makes a lot of sense. So in other words, you might have a triad in the first half of the row and another triad in the second half of the row that relate to 2 different keys. And you might have other things going on in between that are much more chromatic. And that is something that can work. But just be careful, that danger of the piece becoming monotonous because you've just got the same kind of recurring triads going all over the place. Now, you can partly solve that by having a wide variety of melodic intervals within the row to kind of balance any of that kind of triadic thinking. So it means that, you know, you can put triads, have key center implications within the row, but you perhaps need to balance that with something else. Now let's have a look at these two examples that I've put on the screen. And the first example is really exploring the danger of overusing triads. So bear in mind what Cranach has said, probably better to have no more than 2 triads within the row. Well, I've constructed a row here that's got 3 triads in it, and I think you'll quickly see the problem. So let's just play this row. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, you can see immediately what's going on here, can't you? Notes 1, 2, 3, C major triad. Notes 4, 5, 6, D flat major triad. Notes 7, 8, 9, D major triad. So I've just got 3 major triads going up a semitone each time. So you can see that those triads are probably going to over-dominate, because not only are we using the row as a melodic device, we're also using it to construct our harmony, and we'll be onto that topic later on in the course. So if you end up sort of saying, well, I've got notes 1, 2, 3 harmonically all sounding together, then 4, 5, 6, then 7, 8, 9. You can see how we're really stuck with those 3 major triads then, aren't we? And whatever we do, they're going to turn up in retrograde and inversion and in retrograde inversion, and we're going to be kind of severely hemmed in with that. Okay, even melodically, it's a little bit kind of over predictable, isn't it? I'm going up a triad, I'm coming down a triad, I'm going up a triad, and then I'm using up the 3 spare notes at the end to do something slightly different. And when you come to notes 10, 11 and 12, they come as quite a relief after those triads. And if we're thinking that just by looking at the original row, imagine how that's going to be over the course of a long piece where we've heard these triads over and over again. So this is illustrating the danger of overusing triads. But you might listen to that row and say, oh, actually, that's given me a kind of sign of hope if I want to be a composer who's still got some kind of sense of tonality as we've known it as part of my style, but wanting to write in a serial way. This could be a danger for you, the overuse of those kind of triads. Okay, let's have a look at my second example where I've tried to follow Cranach's advice. So I've used 2 triads here, and just to make it a little bit more varied, I'd use one of those in root position and I've used the other one in first inversion. And I've combined this with a more chromatic construction around it. So you can see in green I've highlighted the 2 triads. So notes 1, 2, 3, outlining the C major triad that we had in the example at the top of the page. But the second triad in green, notes 5, 6 and 7, there's D flat major, but instead of using it in root position, I've kind of outlined it in first inversion. So that's an interesting thing to think about, that if you're going to do something that with tonal implications, well, one in root position, maybe one in first inversion, is just giving you another kind of option, as it were. Now, the notes in orange are the non-triad notes, and the notes that are not implying a tonality. And what I've done in this particular row is I've tried to write those reasonably chromatically. So we get a balance between the triads and more chromatic construction. So you see notes 3, 4, 5, we've just got this bit of chromatic stuff, 7, 8, 9, this bit of chromatic stuff, and 10, 11, 12, this bit of chromatic stuff. Now, probably in the real world, as it were, you perhaps don't want to say, well, I'll have 2 triads and then I'll have all this sort of chromatic stuff literally working up adjacent chromatic notes, because that's going to get you a bit boxed in as well, the idea of overusing an idea like that. But it's just kind of making the point that you could construct a row that's got 2 triads in it and has got something chromatic in between. So let's have a listen to this second row and see if that's more satisfying than the first row. Here we go. Now, do you think that's more satisfactory than the first row? Let's hear the first row again at the top of the page. Here's the second one. I think you can see and hear that by having 2 triads instead of 3, it's going to play out better across a composition. But you might decide that actually the first one has certain advantages. I mean, there's a great opportunity for sequence, isn't there? To have this, then the inversion of it, and then back in its original form. That could be quite an interesting bit of sequential writing that comes out of that. You could look at the second one and say, well, yeah, actually, I hear the triad, then the F sharp is a kind of balance to that leaping up in thirds to have something that's just adjacent to it. But I could hear that as G flat that's kind of leading me into D flat major for the next one. You know, you could see a kind of tonal connection there. And then hopefully what's interesting here, that, you know, you might actually hear number 4 as G flat, then this triad in D flat major, then you might hear 8 as a chromatic passing note to E flat. So all of that from note 4 to note 9 could be heard in D flat major. So even though I've only got 2 triads, in a way, I've got quite a strong tonal implication in the second one. Perhaps in a sense more than in the first one. So all these things become part of the design. And then you'll notice that between notes 9 and 10 here, I've got a tritone, which certainly is a useful interval for displacing that sense of tonality. If I'm hearing from note number 4, G flat, maybe F, A flat, D flat, chromatic passing note, E flat, I'm really feeling, oh, this all could be in D flat major. That tritone really throws us out of it, followed by the chromatic finish. So hopefully you're beginning to see there are all sorts of implications about the design of the row, and it's a very important theme to stick with. How does that give us some sense of theme, as Schoenberg encourages us to think about it? What are the implications for tonality within the row? Have I implied a tonality without meaning to? Or am I trying to design a row that's got a strong sense of tonality within it? If I do that, how much tonality can I imply that's going to work out across a piece? Or is there a danger of overdoing it? How do I balance that sense of tonality with other ingredients? If I think I've written a triad, have I written other notes around it that sort of belong to the key? So you see, this is what I'm trying to illustrate in the second one, that you might just think, well, notes 5, 6, 7 are the notes that imply D flat major. But actually, if you look at notes 4 to 9, they can all imply D flat major. And that's quite a chunk of the row, because we've only got 3 notes at the beginning and 3 notes at the end then that don't belong to an implication of D flat major. I'm not saying that's not going to work either. It could work very nicely for you, but it's just to be aware, oh, actually, this sense of a key, a tonal center, could extend outside of the triad by design of the notes that are sitting around the triad in the row. So I hope that's kind of just getting us into, well, how would I write a row that's got tonal implications? What about that is a good thing? What about that is a possible danger as we go? So you might want to play around with that idea of how to use tonality, how much to imply tonality, how to balance that against other ingredients that are kind of doing something that is more atonal by balance. So quite a few things to think about in relation to implications of tonality.